or ANT. It's a long subject. I try to be brief. 62 is when we got independence as a country. By the time of independence, we had two parties: the Uganda People's Congress, which had was a coalition of parties in 58 and 59. I'm not going to go into those details. They formed themselves into UPC. The politics of our country had been influenced by the competing European powers, France, UK, and there were also religious connotations. Because Uganda largely, when the British, Uganda was a British protectorate, and UPC was largely aligned to the Protestant establishment. DP, the Catholics in this country had felt marginalized for a long time. So as a reaction, they were trying to look for ways of how they can get out of the marginalization and come center in the central stream of politics. They merged into forming a party called Democratic Party. 61, there was, before independence, an election under the British. It was a governor. And TP won in actual fact. And the late Benedicto Chiwanka. The British were not very comfortable. So they had caused a repeat of an election in 1962. And there was a new dynamic. At that time, the late Dr. Milton Obote, who was leading UPC, when he went for a coalition with the party which emerged within Uganda called Kabaka Yeka. DP boycotted elections of a dynamic which developed within here because of the kingdom of Uganda. Kabaka Yeka was aligned literally to the kingdom establishment. UPC aligned with Kabaka Yeka. And when you added votes, because it was a parliamentary system, not a presidential system which we have now, the majority of members of parliament, the party which had the majority, would be the one which would lead. So the UPC-KY alliance created a majority, and the late Dr. Milton Obote became the prime minister. Because of the coalition, the late Sir Sekabaka Edward Mutesa became the president. Dr. Milton Obote was the executive prime minister. So the late Benedicto Chiwanka and DP, that government ceased. Therefore, the instruments of power were now handed over to the new government, which was under Dr. Milton Obote, which was meant to be from 62 until 67, 5 years. Because at that time there was a lot of problems. One, there was the Congo crisis, where there was accusation that Uganda had gone into Congo and looted gold and what. Amin was accused, and I think the motion was brought in by the late Daudi Ocheng in Parliament, and it created almost a crisis. In 64. It was manipulated. It never saw the light of day. There was no investigation which was conducted, much as there had been attempts for a public inquiry to be done. In the meantime, within UPC itself emerged internal contradictions because there were two tendencies. One, aligned to the late John Kakonge, who was Secretary General, another aligned to Grace Ibingira. He was a minister, I don't remember which ministry. And that internal contradiction kept on building up. Another contradiction was emerging between the executive itself. The Dr. Obote and UPC were not fully aligned to whatever was agreed upon between UPC and the Kingdom of Uganda. So there was a mixture of some lot of dynamics which were involved, which unfortunately led to 1967, when there was what you normally hear of as the Pigeonhole Constitution. That constitution, the draft was done, I think, as the late Naisa later claimed, it was written overnight by himself and handed over. So the members of parliament were in parliament were told, at that time the army was surrounding the parliament. They said the constitution is ready, it is in the pigeonhole. So they passed it without debating. 67. That's why they call it the pigeonhole constitution. 67, that's when the crisis now built to a crisis point between the Uganda Kingdom and the UPC government. Because when Mengo Ruchiko sat, they gave a deadline to UPC government to vacate government and leave the land of Uganda. Bote responded by sending the army, which went to Rubiri and attacked Rubiri. The Kawaka of Uganda fled to UK, I think through Rwanda, and they banned the kingdoms. At that time, kingdoms were Uganda, Ankole, Bunyoro, Toro. I think they only those, the ones which were kingdoms. Uganda, Ankole, Toro, and Bunyoro. The Usoga had Chawazinga. They created that, was not a king, or I think it was a chiefdom, kind of, but they didn't have a king before. All other areas, there's no other area which had a king other than those before. And they were banned from that point, 67. And around, I don't remember there whether it was 66, there was alleged to have been a plot within the executive itself of people who were claimed to be aligned with the Kabaka of Uganda, who were in the executive. I think Ibinjira, Lumu, Chiria, and Magezi. I think you can check. 4 ministers were arrested in cabinet. They were locked up in Luzira. They had developed what they used to call is a law, which was adopted
emergency
under
detention.
government.
Emergency detention.
Yeah, detention without what?
Without trial.
Without trial.
Yeah, detention without trial. They were locked up in Luzira. 67, when elections were supposed to be held, they were not. I think that's when, as the trend was on the African continent, UPC declared, no, before that, DP members crossed en masse with their Secretary General. Because Chuanka was outside as the leader of DP. The one who was leading DP in parliament was the late Basil Bataringa. So he crossed with the members of DP and joined the UPC. I think only 3 members of DP remained in parliament. The late Bianyuma, I don't remember the other 2. There was a gentleman from Teso and I think another one from West Nile. 3 who remain now in the opposition. In 68 thereabouts, Uganda was declared a one-party state. So DP was banned. But that was not only unique to Uganda. Many African countries became one-party states. And then the election was now postponed to be in 1971. In 68, there was an attempt on the late Dr. Milton Obote's life, the delegates conference in Uganda. So a crisis was building up within the country. Basically, I think people like Semogere had also been arrested and locked up, who was in DP. And 71, that's when the election was going to be held. UPC had established a system, a new system, many people in Uganda don't know about that, which was going to be 1+3. That was going to be the nature of elections. So that if you are going to stand in a constituency, like here is what? Akawa. This is Chira.
This is Wakiso.
Wakiso. If you are a member of parliament for Wakiso, you also have to stand in other 3 constituencies, each constituency in a region, because there are 4 regions. Uganda, Central Uganda, West, North, and East, which meant that from your own constituency where you were born, you'd have to have 3 other constituencies in 3 different regions. The trick was, if they were opposition people, like in that case, even if they were DP who would come to run, you definitely would not have the logistical support or the networks for you to be able to spread all over the country. It was only the ruling party which would have been able to do that, because it had contacts everywhere. That's how the 1971 elections were going to be conducted. Unfortunately, that was never to be. Amin took over government in 71 and banned all electoral politics. It was a military, gave me 18 points, and then for 8 years until 79, no party politics. It was leadership by decree, the famous decrees. But since they were quite elaborate, I think they used to have many good lawyers who would go down and sit down, and the decrees would be passed. And then the country was run like that. And then 79, Amin makes a very silly mistake. Every regime which is going to come down normally makes silly mistakes. I see these ones who are here making silly mistakes, they're about to go. Went and attacked Kagera in Tanzania, and took that part. Because if he hadn't attacked Kagera, most likely Amin would have remained on maybe for another, I don't know how many years. Because there was no sign that there was any effective resistance internally, and the guerrillas out there were very weak. But when he attacked Tanzania and took until Kagera, Nyerere said, this can't happen. So he started mobilizing in Tanzania. And he came into Uganda. Initially, the plan, I understand, was to attack, capture Mbara, capture Masaka, and punish Amin, and then pull back. Because when Amin attacked Tanzania, they went and razed down the sugar plant, sugar factories and other things, broke bridges in the Kagera. So I think they wanted to carry out punitive actions against Uganda. But then, the whole purpose was when they capture Mbara and Masaka, then they would let the Ugandan insurgents who were in Tanzania then be able to fight on their own. There was the Chikos Malum, which was aligned to UPC, and then there was Foronasa, which later became the Genome 7 Front. There's another small group called SUM, S-U-M, Save Uganda Movement. People like the late Pojok, Akena Pojok, the Kanyomozis, and the Ejarus. Those were Save Uganda Movement, operating from the Kenyan front. So, when they took over Mbarara and Masaka, the groups were supposed to have recruitment, which they did. Now, the Uganda army, by that onslaught by the Tanzanian forces, was recognized to have weakened. So the Tanzanians were enticed now to continue moving, and that's what happened. To Kampala on 11th of April, 1979. And Italy made a move until the Sudan border, and Uganda was captured, and it was put under UNRF. Now, in the meantime, the exiles who were spread all over the world were invited into Tanzania. It's what eventually was called the Moshi Conference, organize themselves. When the Tanzanians recognized that the regime could easily fall, initially they weren't sure whether they'd be able to take Kampala. But when they recognized that the situation was, they were looking for how to legitimize that onslaught onto Uganda by creating a Ugandan political force. So about 21 or 22 groups from all over the world merged into Moshi and created what they call Uganda National Liberation Front. They appointed the late Professor Yusuf Ure to head it. It had a commission, it had a national council. And then they came into the country once Kampala was taken. As the forces continued advancing northwards, UNLF took over. So the question was, what do they do? There were two versions. One, I remember I was at university at that time. We used to go to National Conference Center to listen to the debate. There were two forces. One was saying UNLF should remain for a significant number of years, create the necessary conditions that would enable Ugandans to emerge out of the problems that we are dealing and also create a new direction for a new political dispensation. The political forces, the old ones, UPC and DP, they were collaborating this time actively. They were saying, no, this can't happen. Parties must come back now. And when they sat in the national NCC, which was chaired by Gumayo, they decided to dissolve. They voted actually. The majority, DP and UPC, who were many, voted for the comeback of parties. That was in 80, and that was in 79. They started preparing for elections in 1980. Which election was held? I don't remember which month. In 1980. Then there were three parties, UPC, DP, and CP also came on board. At that time, it was held by the late Mayanja Kanji, and the one which is now headed by Chamzi. And UPM emerged because there was a feeling amongst the young people and other people who were tired of the old politics saying there needs to be a third force. UPM came on board. That's the one which fielded the current General Museveni. It got only one seat, Kasese, by some accident because the DP member who had run died.
Chionga came by accident.
Chionga became the MP. And definitely, to me, if you talk to UPC people, they'll tell you that they want that election. My family background is UPC, so I have no reason to undermine UPC or anything. But I know, I was a young man, I know that UPC ran that election. DP won that election. Because I remember that African politics is very interesting. Because they on nominations day, and whenever I meet colleagues of UPC, nobody ever says anything about that. On elections day, Karuma they put a roadblock at Karuma. And they had detected all members of DP who are going to run in Western and in the North. They arrested all of them in the morning, and they released them at 5 in the afternoon. They couldn't reach at 17 seats went through. UPC candidates went through unopposed. If you sit with the people who were in UPC then and they are honest, they also tell you that internally within UPC itself, the primaries of UPC itself were also weak. When you sit with them, the old people, they tell you, because people whom they were not so sure of, they would knock out, and they would bring out those whom they believed were conk, people who would stand by whatever UPC wanted to do. I know a number of people. I think someone told me that I think the Electoral Rangaranga was sent to go and organize the primaries. Rangaranga or something. In one of the areas in Acholi, and the delegates had been told to be at 10, I think in Kalongo, no, maybe at 2, but at 10, the delegates who knew the inside story, I think, were in another location, and they voted for the UPC candidate. Because when they turned up in the location they had been told, the election was over. So that's the nature of the parties that we've had. Not only here in Uganda, incidentally, when you read the history of other parties in other African countries, that seems to be the nature of politics. Politics of manipulation, politics of lies, politics of deception. That runs almost across quite a number of African countries. The nature of internal politics in those parties. And of course, that sparked off a war, 81, which some of us participated in. And 85, there was an internal collapse of the second UPC government. DP went into parliament, so there was a multi-party system of governance, more or less. They had representation in parliament. I think for the second time, again, there was a crossover. Someone who remembers very well needs to remind me. Because the group from Busoga of DP crossed from DP to UPC. And then the only one who remained was similar or something like that. That's a detail I don't recall very well. I know the significant number, about 3/4 again crossed. 85, the army took over, second time. There were many fighting factions which formed a coalition. Those of us who were in the bush kept on fighting. 86, we took power, ousting the junta. And you know the promises which were made that time. More or less like what the debate during UNLF, to say, let's create an environment where the foundation is laid, so that by the time parties re-emerge, there's already a firm foundation for a new political dispensation. That's what we had hoped for. That's what had even led the constitutional making process, which took, I think, a year and a half or 2 years. In 95, the constitution was promulgated, and many people jubilated. We thought that was going to be a new beginning. We had embedded within the constitution the term limits, which was not unique to Uganda, but in many African countries. Because what I'm telling you was more or less what happened in a significant number of other African countries. Parties that came in at independence started establishing a culture of manipulation, deception, and lies, and division, and it led to coups, because I think in those years, in about 30 years, Africa had experienced about 40 plus coups. So parties, multi-party system, then into one-party states, then coups, and then in the 80s, a re-emergence of an attempt to democratize. That's when parties started to emerge. At that time, that's when there was a movement system of governance. So by writing that constitution, putting in term limits, that was supposed to be one of the checks to abuses of power. But as you can see, again, that culture, in as far as I'm concerned, has never been uprooted. The culture of deception, lies, and manipulation. It has taken root, it has grown. Different actors, same culture. And you see where we are at again, another crisis. So in 2004, there had been agitation for the comeback of parties. And then, Genome 70, actually I was part of the National Council. And the issue of parties was not on the agenda. What emerged was that Genome 7 brought in the issue of the parties and twinned it with the amendment of the Constitution to remove term limits as a maneuver to show as if he's trying out to democratize, but at the same time achieve what he desired most. which was so critical in terms of being an effective check to abuses of power. Because when you look across the whole continent, the African countries which have retained the term limits are stable, even when they have problems in governance. Because it creates hope in people knowing that a president, even if he's poor at governance, his or her time is ending and they are leaving, another one is coming up. So naturally, an evolutionary process takes place. They keep on improving whatever weaknesses they may have. Here, and I think he removed it using the parliament, which is so problematic, which is another factor that we need to look at as we look at multi-party systems of governance. Whatever any other nature of governance, the question is the nature of the political actors. Because that's at the center of all. There are the structural form, but there is the actors. Because the actors, if they were firm, if they are people who cared about the country more than themselves as individuals, there's no way General Museveni would have succeeded in amending the constitution in 2004. And if he had failed to amend the constitution, I think where we are now would be totally different from what is happening now. For sure. But he succeeded because of the nature and lack of character of the people who are in parliament, and also those who are in the National Council, because it is the one which passed the resolution within the movement at that point in time. So you can even see the manner in which space was opened up for political parties. General Museveni wasn't saying, let's create a new political dispensation where multipartyism can be established, where there can be democratic practices and tolerance. When you hear the expressions they were giving were saying that there are these multipartists, let's use a word in Uganda, I don't know how to interpret it in English, to make Jacob, that let's, I don't know how to put it meaningfully in English, to make Jacob.
Distancing yourself.
Silence.
Get away from.
Let's
Bala is good in literature.
Let's wink them.
no. Let's save ourselves from them.
Bitter from them. Even Jacob.
To make Jacob, that's what you said. Let us leave them go.
Let us save ourselves from them.
You know, it was like in a country, you are here and they are there. It's the same country. You know, as a maneuver and a manipulative way of almost indicating that these people have a problem with the country. So let's save the country by saving ourselves and putting them outside there. And almost making it seem as if the movement now wasn't a party. It was a party, even now it is a party. But you can see the nature of thinking. That is the environment on the basis of which parties were opened up for. And from that time until this time round, you can see that they have not created a conducive environment in which parties can grow. Now, parties are vehicles for governance. That's where people whose interests are similar congregate and say, we want to run a government or manage a country on such ideological basis. Our policy positions are these. Let's go out in the public and people compete on the basis of what each party presents, and then they can elect the program which they decide. That hasn't happened yet in this country. But two, what I've already referred to, I think a party's direction, a party's internal culture, a party's strength is dependent on the nature of the people of whom it is composed. Cannot run out from that. If the nature of the people we've had in our politics in Uganda, including now, were of a character of people who say, we want to see transparency in the country. We want to see good governance systems in place, where there are checks and balances, where there is equality for the law, where there is justice. what is observation of human rights. If the majority of the actors were like that, then that's what they would give. But there's nobody who's going to give you what they don't have. If you have a party composed of 100 people, and 80 of them think like that and similarly act in that manner, then when they're in power, that's what they will give. But if you have a party which has 100 people, and 80 of those think that, when you're in politics, first it is yourself. And then whatever else happens, other people can, it means that they're going to be corrupt because they're going to try to amass wealth for their own advantage. It means that they cannot be fair because they'll be manipulating system. So that's what they have, that's what they give. And therefore, the nature of parties as we see them now, and quite a significant number of African countries, are still in the same trap that we're in Uganda. Parties being vehicles of governance, they are the only ones which will govern unless constitutions are changed. So if any country is going to change direction, in my own estimation, it starts with the parties themselves. Who is in those parties? That's the most important thing. How do they think? How do they act? Because the manner in which they think is the way they will act. Because actions are led by the manner in which, how people think. Actions follow thoughts. That's where we are at. Because now we have about 30 parties. The ones which are active are less than maybe 6 or 7 or 8. That's what we have right now. There seems, or at least by constitution, we talk about elections, but you know the nature of elections that we have. Internal elections are problematic in almost all parties. The only party that I know of so far that have been, a relatively well-managed internal process. Could be some challenges, but they're on track. At least I know until the time we separated was in FDC. Because there would be internal elections. Tough competition. But incidentally, Mugisha was the chairperson of the election commission. Some of us who believed in democratic practices. And Honorable Salasso was the Secretary General until a later point, much later. We believe that then, those of us who are in FDC, that for us to be able to create a new political dispensation that would start acting in a manner that would want to see how the party would act even when it is in power. If it is elections, you have to practice internal governance systems. If it is transparent of resources, the way you manage your resources. So the training ground normally is within the political parties themselves. The building of character. How do you become transparent? How do you manage resources? But we are no longer in FDC. I don't know what is happening there, but I think FDC has a firm foundation on the basis of which it can build if it remains on that track. The other parties are new. We are new here in NT, but we are a value-based organization. I believe once we stick to our values, we would create an example for parties, not only here in Uganda, but also elsewhere, once it is sustained over a period of time. NUP is still a new organization. I don't think they have had a chance to do what? Go into those kinds of governance systems and all that. DP is older. It still has its own internal contradictions. UPC is older. UPC is also has a lot of internal contradictions. JEMA is a small party. I think JEMA is also one party where they've been doing a number of things in a smooth way. JEMA, yes. CP, I don't know where it is right now. I don't know where it is on the radar. The other party which had started and the path they are walking is almost the way we are trying to move was PPP. The one of the Gandhi study. They now have one member of parliament. I don't know what they are doing now and what part, but they seem to be focused on how to build a modern party organization. So this is where we are at now. One hopes that there be a significant number of leaders in each of these parties that is focused on knowing that, you know what, any of these parties can become the vehicle of governance in the country at some point. And therefore, we must become what we talk about. That's the most critical thing. Because I don't think there's any party which doesn't talk about good governance. They talk about democracy, they talk about transparency, they talk about opportunities, they talk about justice, they talk about human rights observation, they talk about the observation of the principle of separation of powers. There's no party which doesn't talk about that. The question is, what are the parties doing to build a critical number of leaders at all those levels who subscribe to those principles, but are also able to act similarly the moment they're in power? That's where the solution lies. That's where the challenges are for all of us who are building organizations. There is no individual who will give you what they don't have. There's no party which will give you what it doesn't have. What you have is what you give. So in whatever we are doing as Alliance for National Transformation and all other parties, the question is, what do we want to give the country? You cannot be democratic without being tolerant. That's another thing as I finish. I just notice all these internal contradictions that you see in most parties. The basic problem is lack of tolerance, where you find that people don't recognize that you can't all think alike. And therefore, if you don't think alike, what does that mean? You're in one organization. Then there must be internal mechanisms in how you harmonize your thinking. And if we don't think alike, we don't become enemies. But here, even all notice on those of you who are on social media, on all platforms, there are quarrels from morning until evening. It's the character of our national people. It's the character because we are all products of our own society. So the problem is deep. That's what we are dealing with. You can't build democracy without having democrats. You cannot have democrats unless people are tolerant. Those are things we must really engage in and think deep. I can tell you the challenge that we are going to have, because there's going to be change. There will be change. One way or another. The question is the nature of the people who will be there. Because one thing we don't have yet is a computer through which you can walk people. You know, like these things when you're walking to a hotel. You know, the metal detector. Yes. I wish someone could discover that thing. It would solve all human problems. Because basically what it would mean, they would put it there on the door and people walk through. And they would put there in the program, they would say, is this person tolerant or intolerant? It's the honest question. And if you walk through and it shows red, it shows intolerant. You stay out. If it shows green, then the person goes through. That would be the easiest way. Right now we don't know. So it is when we get there, whichever group goes there, if it is NT or NUP or FDC or DP, whichever group goes there, that's when you know. Because practice is now what brings reality of who people are. Are we together?
Yes.
Yes. There's no other way now of knowing. Except parties like in our case, or any party which is that well organized, to see how people act, even in these internal processes. You are down there, you have got a program, you're going to manage a youth conference, you've mobilized resources. How have they managed the resources? That's when you start getting to know. Because if you can't manage small things, the bigger things will be more problematic. That's where any party can know through practice over time. Then you can know. Or if you engage in a debate, you understand the levels of tolerance of people, whether and their contradictions everywhere. You are going to meet them. Maybe you are trying to do this. Maybe you are going to do that. Something emerges. How do you handle it? Have you built the patience, the capability for conflict management, conflict resolution, all those? Now, the more people participate and act in those, and where there are mistakes, they correct them and keep moving, and they build internal cohesion, they build an internal culture in the party, along the values that they believe in, the more they become what they would want to deliver. Are we together? Yes. So these internal processes are the most critical. You hear people saying, where is the end? We are trying to build what we want to give to the country. This meeting of this nature, a meeting of this nature, in as far as I'm concerned, is more important than standing on a platform and addressing 50,000 people in a rally. And now, yes, in an electoral process, when you are campaigning, the rally is very, very important. But you see, by the time of the rally, during elections, you are going into power. You've not gone through processes like this. 2 years. You start asking, what happened to these people? You never prepared. You never prepared. We are all products of our own society. You can hear what people are saying. They say, those poverty, the things that they are doing are for Europe. You hear them saying that? Yeah. These people want a better country. They want a better managed country. They cry about corruption. They cry about human rights abuses. They cry about all kinds of things. But when you come talk about values, they ask you, are we going to eat values? That's a society of which we are products. Are we together? Yes. So to serve that society, we must work day and night to become different from them. I can tell you, if our thinking remains the way our society thinks, we will not break out of the vicious cycle. Ime here yesterday, I think is the one who gave an example, who said, I think it was Ime, who said that if you get out of like university and you get into a powerful office and you have not built a big house in 1 year, they say, what kind of fool is this? Yes. That's our society. They are the ones crying about corruption. You tell me, if parties in the opposition that hope change this country don't work day and night to create a new mindset, or people who say, want good vehicles, want good houses, yes, we will get them, but we must build systems through which there will be equal opportunities, through which there will be opportunities through which I can go borrow money, long-term, low interest rate, build a house, a hotel, whatever, but through legitimate means. Yeah. Are we together? If we don't do that, how on earth do you think things can change for the better? How? The things we are doing that they are for Europe. I keep telling people, you put a ship in Mombasa and Dar es Salaam and free aircraft and give a notice on radio and TV and say America and all countries in Europe have now allowed any Ugandan who wants to go, no visas, you go. How many will remain here? How many will remain here? Most of the educated. So they want things of Europe and America, but they don't want to make the necessary sacrifices to establish them here. You think America and Europe have come the way they are, where they are, without people who had to make the necessary sacrifices. They had to. So in short, Failures, you've had a number of failures. Successes, none yet. It looks like none yet. Those that have been tested, none has performed yet in the manner in which any country should be run. Lessons to learn, that's what I'm just talking about. Where's the solution? It's ourselves. I believe. I believe in this so deeply that's why I don't care about numbers. I don't care about what people say. Because people who change countries are never in millions. Opposition parties, like in the event that we get during this conference, I don't know the calculations we have. I suppose it'll be around 1,500 or so. Most of these opposition parties would have similar numbers, between 1,000 and 2,000. I can tell you if there is an organization that has a delegates conference of 1,500 people, but that's the topmost representation. And out of 1,500 people, we have got 800 solid men and women, honest with integrity. They'll change this country so right.
We're not singing our failure.